Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the summit. Really excited for today's conversation. This is a fireside chat with Sahil and I. And for those of you that are not familiar with him, go to any platform and just Google him. I have loved watching you grow over the last several years. You came from, corporate finance to becoming a creator. So really excited for this chat, specifically around how you've grown such a massive audience in a pretty short period of time. I want to kick us off with you making the career pivot from corporate finance to becoming a leading creator in the industry. What initially sparked this interest in building a digital audience for you and like the move out of finance?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thanks everyone here. Anyone that I don't know or haven't met, excited to get to know all of you. And I'm easy to find, so please send me an email, follow up. Would love to get to connect with more of you in real life and over the internet. I have a pretty atypical path, probably relative to most people, in that I was never someone that thought about creative work as something that I would do for a living, quote unquote. I was walking down this very traditional path, working in finance. I was at a private equity fund for the first 7 years of my career. And, just being vulnerable for a second, I would say most of the decisions that I made over the first 30 years of my life were grounded in this deep-seated insecurity and this desire to seek external affirmation in order to make myself feel that I was impressive. And I chose a career path going into finance that I thought from the outside looking in would make me feel successful. It was a path that, my parents would think made me successful, that friends would think I was successful. All of these things, it was always about other people thinking that I was doing well. And at some point along the way, I realized that all of the kind of external affirmations in the world can't fix an internal problem, which is that I was working on things that I was not energized by, and that every single day I was spending doing that was a day I was never going to get back. And to be honest, I don't know that I would ever have come to that realization if not for the chaos that kind of got infused to my life by COVID. And I remember when I was living in California at the time, the whole country got locked down and I was stuck at home. And for the first time in 7 years of my career, I didn't have, a commute every single day. I didn't have 3 or 4 days of travel every single day. I suddenly had all this time on my hands, and I just started thinking to myself, what am I going to do with all of this free time? I can't see friends. I can't really do anything. And I started sharing things on Twitter originally that I was sort of just like writing or journaling about. And there was never any intention behind it. I had 500 followers on Twitter at the time. I knew that I kind of understood the world of business and finance in a unique way and had a unique lens of looking at it that I could maybe share and write about. But I never thought like, oh, this is a path I'm going to go down and I'm going to leave my job and, had a plan around it. There was no such thing as a plan. And, one of the things I say I've fundamentally learned over the last few years is that the whole idea of like a 5 or 10-year plan is nonsense. And the reason I say that is because the most interesting opportunities in life, the things that you look back on and say, like, that was the inflection point, that was incredible, are inherently nonlinear and asymmetric, meaning you cannot plan for them. Like, if you had asked me 5 years ago to map out 100 different versions of where I would be in 5 years, 100 different 5-year plans, not a single one of them would have been me sitting here talking to all of you today. And so by definition, it was ridiculous to sit down and make that plan, because what I needed to do was have the space in my life to pursue the things that my energy was pulling me towards. And fortunately, COVID created that space where I was able to lean into the things that I got energy from, which in this case was writing and sharing ideas. And so if there's one thing that I would say to anyone out there that's sort of aspiring to do more, to lean into these different paths, the different things that they're working on, it would be that. It would be, give yourself that space, ventilate your calendar, like create the space in your world that you have the headspace, that you have the bandwidth, that you actually have the time, that you can go after those nonlinear asymmetric opportunities that come. Because if you jump at the first thing that comes your way, it might not actually be the right thing. And if you had just tolerated uncertainty a little bit longer, you might have found that gold on the other side.
Love that advice. When you were first starting to write, what did that writing process look like? And how did you know where to start and what to say? Like, how did you know what your voice was and that it would be valid?
The short answer is that I didn't know that. I am generally a big believer that those feelings of kind of uncertainty and imposter syndrome are a positive indicator, and reframing that in your mind around anything you're doing is really healthy. It's, effectively you're thinking of imposter syndrome as a tax on personal progress. Every time you're sort of running up into that feeling, it's because you are by default going beyond your current capability and competency set. And so with my writing, it was a big feeling of imposter syndrome, but I still feel that today. Like writing my first book, I feel that in a major way. Writing my first newsletter, I felt that in a big way. Writing on Twitter for the first time, I felt that. But you don't identify what your voice is until you actually create, until you actually do the thing. It's like, I think Rumi has the quote, as you begin to walk the way appears. As you begin to walk the way appears. And so it's the same thing with anything creative. It's like, you don't know, you can't actually sketch out what your voice is and exactly what you're going to talk about and how people will resonate with it. You just have to start and then learn and allow yourself the separation to kind of actually take the feedback that you're receiving and hearing from people, either naturally or directly, and adjust course accordingly.
I love that. Yeah, Tina is in the chat saying imposter syndrome as a tax to personal progress. So good. So I first got to actually meet you in person last summer at Craft and Commerce. And then I got to see your keynote on stage. And you talked about this, what did you call it? The framework for sustainable high quality growth. And you'd mentioned that the framework centered around consume, ideate, create, and amplify. Can you kind of walk us through this framework? Because I feel like people get stuck in the consume and they're not necessarily in the ideation, creation, amplify stage when it comes to creating content.
Yeah. This is a framework that I think is really useful because it applies to any type of content that you're going to create. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing written content or video, long form video, short form video, long writing, short writing. You really need these four components. It's CICA: consume, ideate, create, amplify. The consume is the ultimate top of the funnel for everything. That is, what information are you taking into your brain? Anything that you ultimately create and share is going to be downstream from something that you consume. So what you consume is very important. That's your information diet, if you will. And your ability to consume regularly high quality information is essential, and it needs to be a part of your system. You can't just sit down at your computer and expect that you're going to be able to create high quality, exceptional thoughts every day if you're consuming garbage or if you're consuming nothing. And so setting up a system where that's part of your daily activities, it's part of your daily systems where you're consuming things, where you're reading, where you're listening, where you're having conversations. Any of those things are that consumption layer, where the higher quality consumption, the higher quality your creation will be. So I always recommend to anyone starting out, make sure that you have a window of time every day blocked on your calendar where it's just about consuming. It's just about actually having the ideas starting to trickle into your brain. The next phase is, I would say, the most forgotten one, which is ideate. This is actually giving yourself the time to think about the things that have come into your brain. So if you have 100 conversations with super interesting billionaires, entrepreneurs, whatever, but you never think about them, you're never going to be able to distill, place your own lens, create your own connections between ideas, form those mental models or maps. You're never going to be able to share the information that you've gathered in an interesting, concrete, and digestible way if you don't sit and think about it and give yourself the space to do that. I find the easiest way to build ideation into your schedule is to just go for walks. I every single day am at least out on a walk for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. And that's literally just thinking. I'm not listening to a podcast on 2x speed. I'm not listening to an audiobook. I'm not taking notes. It's just thinking about the things that have come into my brain and starting to form those connections and thinking about, okay, what are the most interesting pieces that I can pull on and go deeper on and think about? So that's the second piece. Build an actual ideation framework into your day. Actually have a process around the thinking. Create that space in your life to do that. The next piece is create. Anyone that's a creator understands this. That's when you're actually sitting down and creating the content. It's when you're filming the video. It's when you're writing. It's when you're doing those actions. The last piece is amplify. And when I talk about this, what I say is that everyone sort of exists on a spectrum, and I'll do it narrow so that you can actually see this, a spectrum between pure artist on one end of the spectrum and pure marketer on the other end of the spectrum. And a pure artist is a person who only cares about the idea, and they don't care if not a single person sees that idea, because it's the idea that really matters. And that's a pure artist. The other end is a pure marketer. They don't care about the idea quality at all. They just care about getting it out to as many people as possible. This is like the growth hacker, the person that shares threads on TED Talks that'll change your life, that they know can go really viral, but it's not a necessarily new or novel idea. This is the person that like writes the one blog post every eon and there's absolutely no distribution on it. It might be brilliant as all hell, but no one's going to see it. You need to sort of figure out where you exist on this spectrum. And if you're going to exist in the middle between the two, you need to figure out what are the actions you're going to be taking to make sure that your amazing idea and artistry is actually getting seen. Because in my opinion, we live in this world, we live in this moment in time, unique era where you can have your ideas reach millions of people instantaneously. Like 100 years ago, an author, I'm publishing my first book. 100 years ago, an author would have had to wait until after they died for their book and their ideas to truly reach mass scale. Because it just took that long for the thing to get printed, published, travel across the world, go on boats, trains, all of that stuff to reach people. Now, you can literally do that sitting at your desk today. You can put out an idea, and if it's a good idea, it might reach a lot of people. But actually taking the time to think about that distribution strategy, about the amplification of the idea and how you're going to leverage your own channels, how you're going to leverage social media, how you're going to leverage your peer groups, your networks of people that might want to help you reach more people, is critical. Because if you don't think about that, your ideas are just going to be getting shouted into the void, and you're not going to have that traction and ability to impact people that many of us, that's really what we're seeking as we do all of these things.
Yeah, I love this framework. It puts it into a really easy, digestible process when it comes to like the consume all the way to amplify. Speaking of reaching millions of people, you have built a massive audience over the last couple of years. Can you share your kind of step-by-step roadmap for growing an email list in the early days? Because I know where it is now, but whenever, let's say the first 6 months, first 6 to 8 months growing the email list, what was that process like?
The biggest challenge with email lists, and podcasts are similar to this, is that they don't have any real native discovery. And so you're running into basically a question of how are you going to hack distribution? How are you going to get it out to that initial sort of seeding of people that you can then grow on the back of? The easiest way to do that is through social media, and you basically ride on the back of broader distribution channels. So you have your massive discovery at the top, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, whatever it might be, and then you're using that to funnel people down to your newsletter. The key there that I think a lot of people miss is the clear through line from the top of funnel discovery thing to the newsletter. So what I did, and what I thought was really effective, was I would write something on Twitter, like a thread that had more viral reach and would connect with people. From there, I would say, basically, if you want to go deeper on this idea, I am going to write about it in my newsletter, and you can sign up for that here. And I would put that next. And so the whole concept was, if you read to the bottom of this thread about a topic, and now you get hit with something that just says, want to go deeper on this? Because you clearly liked it if you got to the end of this long thing. Here's a way for you to go deeper on it, and I'm delivering it to you on a platter. You can just sign up right here. The conversion on that is 10x higher than the conversion on me just saying, hey, sign up for my newsletter. with no real connection to the thing that the person liked. You're getting a really ripe audience and driving them through. Leveraging that principle across everything is the real key. The second piece that I think just often goes overlooked with all discussions of growth is what really matters is consistently high quality content on all of this stuff. We can talk about all the growth hacks in the world, but the fundamental mental model that I have for all of this, if you're trying to build a sustainable, durable business, right? I left a career track that had a 30, 40-year time horizon. So when I started doing this, I thought, how do I make this a 30, 40-year time horizon track that I'm getting onto? And the only way to do that is to think about trust as the key metric. And why I say that is because commerce follows trust. Think about that framing in that mental model. Zoom back 50 years. Trust was centralized in the hands of a few companies. Procter and Gamble, Johnson and Johnson, a few large conglomerates owned all of the airwaves. They owned all the radio, all the magazines, all the TV ads, all of those things. And so people trusted them because they owned that. As a result, they were able to build commerce layers on top of that into all of these different areas. Now what you have is, if you follow the direction of this like arrow of progress through time, that trust has been rapidly decentralized into the hands of everyone on this call. You have there's thousands of people that'll be on this call during the course of the day that are little trust nodes around the world. You have that trust, you can build layers of commerce on top of it. But the key point here is that it is trust that is the atomic variable. It is not follower counts, subscriber counts, like counts, view counts, any of the vanity metrics. It's trust. So you could take a 1 million person audience on Instagram, but if it's built on the back of random memes and hot takes, no one knows who you are potentially, and no one really trusts you for delivering whatever commerce you're going to deliver. So you might take someone that has a 10,000 person audience of people who deeply trust them around the topic of bird watching. And that person can build a multi-million-dollar business, where the person that has 10 million followers on Instagram might not be able to sell 20 t-shirts to that audience if the people don't care. And so what that means as you think about a newsletter list is trust has to be the key thing that you're focused on. And trust is built through consistently delivering value to people over a long period of time. There's no way to hack trust. You can't hack trust with your fancy marketing techniques and, growth loops and, paid ads and all of those things. That's not trust. That's growth. That's numbers. And then your job as the actual creator is to turn those people into people that are gifting you with their trust.
Okay, I want to go deeper on this. I love that you brought this up, because do you think there's an aspect of building trust that is sharing your personal life? Because there's aspects of your brand and what you write that is more leadership focused. It's based on your years of experience in finance as a business builder. But then you also are like sharing your ice baths and your methodologies on parenting for your son. Like you have this interesting balance of business leadership content, and then there's the personal side as well. And I feel like the personal aspects of sharing online can build trust quicker. How do you balance the two? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that authenticity certainly builds trust. And look, for me, I don't know how to share if it's not who I actually am. I can't do the whole act thing, right? Like, I've met a lot of big creators, and it's split. Like, there's some people that it's totally different from who they are online. And I have no, you're like, oh, wow, this is very different than what I imagined you to be. And it's not super authentic. And I don't know. It's almost impressive to me, actually, that you can act for that long of a period of time, because I just think it's challenging. Like, I think you can act for a year, maybe 2 years, but like over long periods of time, it's going to be very, very hard. And I think that's why you see a lot of creators burning out, right? Like, you get caught up in creating the content that the people want rather than the content that feels energy creating, that is natural to you, that you really want to share, and that you're so compelled to share that you have to figure out a way to get it out into the world. And so for me, that means that I have to create content around things that I actually care about, that I'm actually living by and doing on a daily basis. And so when I talk about, like, I mean, look, my book is called The 5 Types of Wealth. My book is about all of these different areas of life. if I'm not living by those things, if I'm not a product of that idea, why would I ever expect someone to listen to me on any of these things? If I'm not living by those principles as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a son, if I'm not walking the walk in terms of the health and wellness stuff that I talk about, if I'm not living by these things in how I actually operate, I can't expect anyone to trust me. And so sharing that journey is essential to building that trust. I personally think that for any creator out there, no matter what your business is, if you're a wealth manager and you're trying to have content be kind of a lever of growth for your business, you're going to talk about the wealth management industry and you're going to try to attract new clients to your business. No one is hiring a wealth manager because they're actually generating alpha or upside in the markets. There's maybe a wealth manager is going to tell you that they do, but no one really does, right? Like basically, they're going to get market returns, which is great. And what you're really hiring the person for is because you like the person. You're buying from the person because you like the person. Like I listened to Jasmine Star talk before this. I'm like, I don't know what she's selling, but I kind of want to buy whatever it is because I like Jasmine. I just think she's great, and I want to support her and I want to see her win, and I really like her. That's an example, right? Like her sharing about her life and the type of person that she is, her values, what she believes in. That really helps with someone connecting to you and trusting you and believing that they really know you. And so sharing as a pillar of the things that you're putting out into the world, what your core values are, the type of person you are, the things that you're interested in, your weird hobbies, is really important. And, the other thing I think about with all of this is, and I've been thinking about it more and more recently, is just this idea of being a pattern interrupt. And what I mean by that is having something about you that just doesn't line up with what people would expect is such an amazing asset in your life. I'll give you an example. I was meeting the other day with a young woman who is on the audit team at PwC. Arguably the most boring job in the world, right? Like auditing at PwC. Great career track, but like one of the most boring things ever. And I was like, well, what are you interested in? She's thinking of making a change. And she said, I love doing stand-up comedy on the weekends. And I was just like, holy shit, right? Like you have to be the only auditor in the entire world that goes up on stage in New York City and does stand-up comedy. That's the most courageous thing I've ever heard. And suddenly, like my framing of who she was as a person was fundamentally just completely blown to bits. And it became so interesting. Now I'm so intrigued by this person because it was a pattern interrupt. It was something different about them. We all have something like that we're hiding underneath the surface because we think it makes us weird. And in reality, it does the opposite. It makes us incredibly interesting to the people that we want to be interesting for. And so allowing those pattern interrupts about you to shine through, to show through in your content is a hugely, hugely valuable idea that very few people are thinking about.
I love this. Permission to be human. It's also a shift in what is professional. I think a lot of times we present a more buttoned up version of ourselves because we think it's not professional, especially as we're building businesses. So I love that. And I'm glad you brought up the book because we're actually seeing 100 copies of Sahil's new book to people that are here with us live. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat. I have a feeling that these 100 copies are going to go really quickly. So I'm going to drop this in the chat. And please fill out this form. Sahil, can you talk about how building an audience helped you land book deal? Because I feel like this is a really interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, I never really set out to write a book. I wanted to write this book. And so I had gotten pitched from a bunch of publishers for a while on writing a book because I had a big Twitter audience or I had a newsletter, and there was never something that I really wanted to write about. And so then when I had this idea, I created the proposal, went out to the market, and the biggest factor in landing the book deal that I did was the newsletter that I had built and the fact that I had an engaged audience of people who read my work and who shared my work and who found value in it. And so it was really like it was a cheat code for, getting to this commercial outcome of the actual book deal that I had built this platform that existed of people who were talking about the things that I was sharing and who hopefully found value in it.
I love that. And literally in the last, what has it been? It's been 2 minutes, not even that. We have 53 people have already filled out the form and that's going
Awesome.
quickly. So excited to partner with you and the team. People are obviously very excited to read your book. I want
I'm
to
very
spend the last
biased, but I
15
think the
minutes
book is.
answering.
I was just going to say I'm very biased, but I put everything I had into this book over the last 3 years, and I couldn't be more thrilled with how it turned out and the impact that I think it's going to have on people. So I can't wait for everyone to read it and to experience it.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here, and it's been really great to partner with your team on getting these books to people. So I want to answer people's questions. So JG asked, can you talk about the habit of making sure you are surrounding yourself with others that are investing in the journey? Everyone's journey is different, but making sure you're surrounding yourself with people that aren't stagnant.
Mm. I think this is probably the single most um, important realization you can have, which is uh, people are either holding you back or pushing you forward. There is no in between. And it's a harsh truth to realize that a lot of the people in your life are no longer well suited for your vision for where you're going. And when you have big dreams and aspirations, there are going to be a lot of people from your prior world and prior seasons that may not want to be a part of that ride. And they will show that through how they talk to you, through their actions, through their support or lack thereof. And your primary directive has to be finding the people and building the circle of people that tell you that you're not thinking big enough, that are pushing you to actually feel uncomfortable about the things that you're setting and the aspirations that you're setting. If you're around someone and you tell them what you're trying to do and they sort of snicker or they tell you to be more realistic or they kind of laugh at you or they make fun of you behind their back, you don't need that person in your life. It's just not something that is conducive to your success. I mean, there is scientific evidence that the people you surround yourself with impact your outcomes. The Pygmalion effect is this thing that says that we rise to the level of expectations that people have for us, or we fall to the level of those expectations if they're low. So literally, if you surround yourself with people who have high expectations for you, who believe that you are capable of much more than what you are doing today, you will rise to the level of those expectations. So
Yeah.
surround yourself with those big thinkers, and don't be afraid to get in those rooms where you feel like you presently don't belong, because eventually you know that if you continue to work, you will belong in that place.
Yeah. And JG said it's even harder when it's those closest to you. I think we've all been there. We've all felt that feeling. And it's hard, but it's worth putting distance between you and people that don't believe in you and that aren't really for you. Next question is around this is from, ooh, I lost it. Who's it from? This is from Grant. If we're overwhelmed, where should we start? Blog, YouTube, short form writing, short form video, long form video? Like, do you have any suggestions there? I feel like I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear what your advice is. But you're also muted.
There we go. My suggestion is to figure out what medium feels most natural to you. I actually think trying to do it all at once is a bad idea. I find it very difficult to do all the different platforms. And I now have a team, right? I have people like we're doing a whole bunch of different things, and I still find it really difficult. And so if you're early in the journey, trying to do it on all the platforms is very challenging. I would figure out what is the single piece of like halo content that feels natural that you can take and redistribute across different mediums. So an example would be if writing feels natural to you, you could write a newsletter. Like this is sort of what I do now. Write a newsletter. That's the thing that you're primarily spending time on. From there, that can get turned into very easily shorter form pieces of content, Twitter, etc. those can get turned into images or like notes or whatever that you're sharing on Instagram, or into little videos where you just pick up your phone and you basically say the thing that you had in your newsletter into your camera and post it immediately as a reel. You basically now took one piece of Halo content that felt very easy and it was simply redistributed into other things. Don't feel like you need to create net new ideas for every single platform. It's just taking the ideas that you've really thought about and vetted and that you've really put your heart into and distributing them naturally across the different platforms.
This leans nicely into Maxine's question for you specifically on writing. How do you bake in time to write throughout the week? I welcome any hacks you have for staying consistent with this, as some folks are more creative focused at different times of the day.
Yeah, I would find like map your energy over the course of a day. Figure out what time of day you feel most creatively inclined. When do you have? I sort of think you have different types of energy, right? Like not all energy is created equal. So creative energy might spike in the morning, and then like administrative energy might be later in the day, and physical energy might be in the evening or something like that. And your creative energy is the real thing that you need to harness. And what you need to do is make sure that you're mapping creative work and output to the time when your creative energy is high. So for me, I am most creative first thing in the morning, like straight out of bed, get in the cold plunge, get out of the cold plunge, fired up, and highly creative to sit down and do something and do some work. And if I was to sit down and do emails, that would be a terrible waste of my creative energy. So what I do is that's when I write. I have the fixed block of time where every single morning, that's when I'm creating content. I was writing my book every single day for the 3 years, or newsletters, or whatever the content is that I'm creating. You need to find that time of day and basically just carve out a little bit of time. And for me, it's my primary work. So it's 2.5 hours, but it could be 15 minutes. If this is something that you're trying to build the muscle around, make it 15 minutes, make it 30 minutes max. If you're trying to build a new muscle, like at the gym, you're not going to go and try to squat 400 pounds the first day, right? It's a ridiculous idea. You're going to get hurt. You're not going to be able to do it. What you are going to do is you're going to go and do like a few body squats. And then the next week, you're going to do 10 pounds. Then you're going to do 20 pounds. You're going to progressively overload that muscle. The exact same concept applies to your creative work. You want to progressively overload your creative muscle. So start with the minimum viable version, whether that's 10 or 15 minutes every single day, but you stick to it. And for a week, you check the box that you did that every single day. And from there, you can build. The other piece of advice I would have is to just create sort of like a flow state boot up sequence, if you will. I've written about this somewhere. It's definitely in my book. But the idea is like create a series of sort of checks that get you into that quick creative flow state. For me, it's like I have my Dunkin' cold brew. I'll have certain classical music or something on my headphones. And basically with those two things, I know I can kind of get into the zone. The cold plunge, I guess, plays into that a little bit as well. But basically, you create these kind of like short little sequence of events, check marks, that get you into that flow state reliably so that you know you can sit down and knock out that work.
I love it. Following Sahil on social, do it. Motivating. And I love seeing people in the chat saying that they're 4 a.m. club, 5 a.m. club, 10 p.m. club, all about finding a time that works best for you. Okay, next, more questions in the chat. So what's your process for, actually, this is one I wanted to ask you previously. What do you feel about creator partnerships as you're building your brand? I know that you've partnered with Viral Cuts. I know you're Paperboy. Like, how do you approach partnerships when it comes to growth? And kind of share your strategy there.
Yeah, so it's a little more nuanced than that. I mean, I own all those businesses. So my holding company has 6 or 7 businesses in it today that I own anywhere from 30 to 100% of. And the partnership is with, in whatever business's case, is with a CEO or any other co-founders who are actually driving the operations of those businesses. So the whole idea is like, there are a few things that I'm very good at. Sort of like marketing, lead generation, strategy, my finance days. I certainly have some like understanding of M&A and markets, etc. But there's a lot of things I'm really, really bad at. Operations, people management, all of the aspects of actually running and building a business. Actually, I'm probably pretty bad at. So I partner with someone who really is good at those things, and complementary skill sets kind of come together to build something that is interesting. So that's kind of how I've pursued those things. I have, a group of incredible business partners who run those businesses. That's their day to day, and they're entirely focused on it. And then, I'm in charge of just very specific things alongside that.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. I know that it's a lot more nuanced than that, but there's so many different ways to earn money as a creator. Like you provide an audience and strategy, and you're able to partner with different businesses to drive leads. Also, I don't know if you saw this in the chat, Sahil, but worth mentioning to you. Cassandra said, there are some people you meet and you want to hug their parents and say, good job, well done. Sahil is one of them. Bravo, mom and dad. So shout out to your parents.
My dad's birthday is today, so I'll send that to him. He'll be very happy.
Okay. Oh, sweet. Yes. Screenshot, send a text to your dad. I love that. Okay. We have a few more minutes left. What is your process for finding ideas? And this is a question from Joe.
It sort of depends. So I'll pull out a prop while I'm talking about this, because this is like my real idea hack, which is this little black notebook that I carry around with me everywhere I go. And in it, I write down anything that I come across that I find interesting. So like I just have pages of like little scratch mark notes that I write down. And my rule with it is that anything I write in there, I have to act on within 24 hours. What I mean by that is I have to either do more research on it. I have to try to teach it to someone. I have to log it as interesting to follow up on later. I have to strike it and say that it's not interesting, but I have to do something with it. And the whole concept there is basically this realization that it's very easy for information gathering to become the dopamine creator. You read a book and you're like, oh, I learned so much, and you get dopamine from that. When really you want to get dopamine from the action, actually delivering value against that thing that you learned. And one of my observations from spending time with some incredible people is that they have a razor thin gap between information and action. So the gap between when they gather information and when they act on that information is razor thin. My gap used to be very wide. I would gather all this information, feel all good about myself, and then do nothing about it. Now what I really focus on is, if I'm going to write something down, if I'm going to think about something, I really want to do something with it very, very quickly. And so that creates a higher burden for writing things down. So I'm not just like taking notes all during the day. I'm only doing it if I'm committing to actually acting and doing something with it. So I really try to spend more time thinking about what am I going to do with this information? What is the action I'm actually going to take? What is the kind of next step with all of this? Than I do just like consuming things. Like I'm not, sitting reading books all day, listening to podcasts all day, doing all of that. And then the last thing I would say is, I find, maybe this is because of the type of content I'm creating and because a lot of it is about the human experience, if you will. Most of my most interesting ideas come from actual conversations with people. And like the example I gave of that young woman who I was kind of mentoring, right? She cold emailed me looking to get together. She was a reader of my newsletter, wanted to chat about career stuff and what her next steps were. I always do those kind of things in person. Like there's no, I don't really do phone calls and I don't really do Zoom calls, but if someone wants to get together in person with me, like I always do that, because those conversations end up sparking this whole idea of the pattern disrupt, right? Like the pattern interrupts. That came from a conversation with a 24-year-old young woman that's looking for advice in her life. That's not like a billionaire entrepreneur that I need to go spend time with to get ideas for the things I'm creating around. Those ideas are actually mostly unrelatable to people that I want to create value for. And so I just find that opening yourself up to the human experience more broadly and listening and observing and being interested is the way that you end up creating interesting things over long periods of time.
I love that. I love that you are accessible in that way. And also like the ego is low. you know, you don't have to do those things, but like your relationship with your ego is so strong and healthy that you recognize that there's so much value and power in doing those things. Last question before we wrap. What has been the most meaningful aspect of this work over the last 4 years for you?
Oh, I mean, far and away, just seeing the impact that you can create with your words and with your content, with your actions. I mean, I had an opportunity to bring my parents along with me to India in March for a series of live events that I did there. And my parents, you know, my mom is from India. My dad's a professor at Harvard, and neither one of them really understood what I was doing, right? Like I was on this very successful track. I stepped off of it to do something different. They've seen the numbers, like they know how many followers I have, but they don't really know what that means. They're not digitally native. And so bringing them to these events and having them see that there are these people around on the other side of the world that have interacted with, read things that I've put out into the world, that have felt such a real impact from them and made changes in their lives. And seeing the connection that you can create with these people all around the world through things that you've just genuinely put out from a place of love and from a heart forward position was, I mean, it was incredible. I get chills thinking about it. Just like the look in my parents, you know, and the reverence that a lot of these people treated my parents with. It was really special for me to have the opportunity to do that. And so when I think about the next 50 years of my life, if I'm fortunate enough to live that long, I can't think of something much more meaningful than the opportunity to try to positively impact hundreds of millions or billions of lives positively.
I love that. I love the work you do. I love the way you view it. And thank you so much for what you've brought to this summit, what you've brought to yes, the form for the book, the 100 copies literally was filled out within minutes. So sorry for those of you that missed that, but please go buy his book. Sahil, where can people stay connected with you?
I am, I have a weird name. So I'm basically at Sahil Bloom on every platform. My email address is sahil at sahilbloom.com. And I see every email, so feel free to send me a note. Would be incredibly grateful if you are interested in any of the things that I talk or write about. If you purchased a copy of the book, I have incredible aspirations for the impact that it can create in the world, and that I know it will create on your life, because the ideas in it have completely changed mine. So thank you all for the time. Truly appreciative. And feel free to tag me, give me a shout, whatever, on social, and shoot me an email. And we'll be excited to get to meet more of you in person in the coming years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sahil. I know you're at a work retreat with your team, so enjoy the rest of your time with the team. Tell bye, and appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you.